Hey everybody, welcome to Tabletop Never Stop. We have yet more spoilers for Song of Ice and Fire miniatures game. Today we're going to be talking about the Night's Watch conscripts, as well as additional information about the Lannister Heroes Box 2, which is basically the Kingsguard. So, jumping right into the conscripts. These are speed 5, they hit on 4s. Their dice line is 7-4-3, pretty big drop off. Defense of 5 up, morale of 8, and they have reinforcements. Each time this unit activates, it may restore up to D3 wounds, and if you control the well symbol, restore 3 wounds instead. Also uninitiated, this unit cannot attach vows. Heads up, I don't know the cost of this unit. I've heard on the Facebook group that it's 5, but I did not see that in writing. I could kind of see it being a 4, but 5 seems likely also. Reason being, although this is absolutely the worst stats we have on a 5 cost unit, they have a pretty strong ability. Healing's very powerful, although it is more powerful on better units than this. But getting 3 wounds back multiple times could really keep this guy in the game. That being said, uninitiated is also a fairly negative ability for Night's Watch units. They certainly want their vows, and so you would not want to field a bunch of these guys because that would really limit your ability to use your cards effectively. Without knowing the cost for sure, that's really all I have to say about these guys. Certainly intriguing. We're seeing lots and lots of new mechanics come into the game. This one's pretty cool, and as long as they don't run into something that's like a total meat grinder, like Mountainsmen or Umber Berserkers or Umber Great Axes, then this is a unit that should be able to hold the enemy in place, bog them up for a while. And since Night's Watch have lots of fast units that can cause some serious issues, it's a useful role for the relatively cheap unit. Although again, I don't think you'd want to field a bunch of them. However, they do come with the Watch Recruiter, which is a pretty exciting unit. It's not available. It's not on this image, but the guy does cost 1. He has forced conscription. Each time an enemy engaged with this unit loses models from an attack or panic test, this unit may restore up to 1 wound. So, a 1-cost unit that every time you injure an enemy, either through an attack or with a panic test, you get a heal a wound. So, with a little bit of luck, you could be getting 2 wounds on an activation. If a unit with this guy is getting activated on the attack spot on the tactics board, then all of a sudden you could be getting 4 wounds back per round, which is crazy good, especially on certain high cost units like the veterans. In fact, I could totally see running 2 veterans or even 3 with these guys. Definitely definitely be a force to be reckoned with. But also, like, I would put this on almost anything in the Night's Watch if I had a point or 2, if I had a point left over. Although I don't necessarily think I need 2 conscripts. I think I probably want at least 2 watch recruiters. And that covers the Night's Watch stuff. Interesting box. Definitely excited. Just waiting to know the cost for sure on the conscript. 5 does seem a little expensive for a unit called conscript, right? Like, it implies just some guys that we grabbed off the street. I actually wouldn't. I was kind of thinking we might see an insignificant unit, but I see why they didn't do that. Okay, so moving on to the Kingsguard attachments, we know the cost of everybody now. We, of course, have seen some of these guys already, but at least now we know what we're dealing with as far as cost goes. First, we have Boris Blount. He has Vengeance of the Crown. While you control the crown, each time this unit is attacked with melee, after the attack has been completed, the attack suffers D3 wounds, and this is a 2-cost attachment. So, goes without saying, these abilities are not that great when you take Joffrey out, because if you don't have Joffrey in your list, you're not going to get to use these abilities possibly half the time if your opponent decides to grab Crown. Also, grabbing Crown in your first absolute activation is not always going to be a great move, because sometimes, for example, you're going to want to get attack, either grab the attack spot or even just attack with a unit. So, like a unit that's about to be destroyed, right? And that's where Joffrey really does come in, because he can he can claim the attack spot and then still counts as you having the crown. If the opponent grabs the crown, you still get it with Joffrey. But of course, Joffrey costs 4 points. And so anyway, my point being is, like, once you've bought Joffrey, the cost of these attachments are actually relatively low, in the sense that the cost of Boris Blount is more costed as if you didn't have Joffrey, right? So that you weren't always going to necessarily get the crown symbol. So let's talk about Blount in particular. For 2 points, getting to deal D3 wounds back, that's cool. So there is something that the enemy can do to negate this card. even if you have Joffrey, and that's basically before you have the crown or have Joffrey on the board. If they attack Blount with their absolute first activation, he's not going to get to use this ability against them. So that just bear that in mind. But D3 wounds is good, especially if you can get Blount's unit in front of a high defense enemy. Some automatic wounds are super great in that situation. And 2 cost is fair, but like you're gonna probably want to be very specific about where you're putting Blount in. This isn't a guy you can just throw in as like a last minute thing. There's several other Kingsguard that are probably better for that and cheaper actually too. So Selma we've also already seen. He costs 3. He has 3 to the crown. Well, you control a crown each time this unit passes a morale test and restore up to D3 wounds, and then also the unit is stalwart, gaining +2 to morale test rolls. So healing is a really powerful ability, especially for Lannisters. They don't have a lot of it, although the Sparrow does, and it looks like the Poor Fellows will have some sort of health generating ability also. But yeah, healing is really good, especially if you can get it into your expensive, powerful units. High defense also. I'm not necessarily sure where I would put him, to be totally frank, unless you were trying to make a unit of Warrior Sons extremely expensive. It does basically mean they're guaranteed to get D3 wounds back every turn, because they'll have an effective morale stat of 2. So unless there's fodderers on them, they're not gonna fail these these morale tests. And actually, that does interact well with the cards of the High Sparrow. So I guess that is probably where you want to put them, although that's an 11 cost unit. It does allow you to pretty much just heal that unit up as much as you want. Outside of that, I feel like Selly's a little bit expensive, honestly. It's a good ability, not denying that, but it's hard to really imagine him in like Mountainsmen or Halberdiers, really, just because there's lots of other things we could do there for a lot cheaper. And again, we're also talking about this is only something I'd want to take if I knew I had Joffrey, and now we have 7 points invested in this Joffrey Kingsguard combo on just one card. So, it's certainly interesting. I don't know if I really see it working that well. I do think there's something interesting you could do with the Warrior Sons, though. All right, here's Jaime Lannister. We were aware of this card, but hadn't really actually seen the text. And it is essentially the Jaime Lannister we saw in the Kickstarter. Costs 2, Expert Duelist. Each time this unit makes a melee attack against an enemy infantry unit, it deals 1 additional wound. If there is an attachment in that unit, you may instead roll a die. On a 3-up, you kill that attachment, which is basically the same thing as dealing a wound, really. But worse, because you also get rid of the attachment. 2 costs, like we said. This guy, and I've already talked about this a little bit, but he's kind of dangerous because he has potential to affect the meta of the game, possibly pretty severely. Now, there are some counters, but of course, even countering him is affecting the meta, right? If you're changing your army up to counter Jaime. Now, that's kind of a worst case scenario where there's loads and loads of Jaimes out there, and you have to be really wary of it, which may not happen, but it does discourage you from bringing lots of attachments. It encourages you to bring non-combat unit commanders and CU commanders as they're immune to Jaime. That being said, like if you run your cavalry into Jaime, then he won't do anything. And if you don't have any attachments at all, then he is he's a 2-cost unit that deals an extra wound, which is an overcost. I do wish that he costs 3. I think if he costs 3, then we'd be seeing a little less of him, but you would still have potential of getting like a huge advantage. But like at this cost, I think he's pretty much you want to bring him. If you're Lannister, you probably want to bring him, especially like tournaments where you can take 2 lists. You don't have to put them in both lists if you're suspicious that you're going to be facing a army with no real attachments in it. But it's pretty good, and if you don't run into any attachments, then extra wounds, nothing to cry about. All right, so that takes us to Mandon Moore, another 2-cost unit. He has dominance of the crown. Well, you control the crown. This unit's melee attacks gain +1 to hit, and when attacking enemies with fewer remaining ranks than this unit, also gain vicious. All right, so a 2-cost unit that gives you +1 to hit. Obviously, +1 to hit's good. Vicious is also good. So if you already have an injured enemy, being able to throw some vicious on there and take them out is great. Best case scenario, Joffrey claims the attack. You now effectively you get a free attack with and getting the crown bonus, and then you can attack again on your second turn. That's a pretty solid combo. You know, if it's halberdiers or mountainsmen, those guys are going to be cleaning up for sure. More's good basically in anything where you're going to end up engaged because you know when you lose that reroll, your damage output goes way down. So getting that +1 to hit is pretty great. It seems to matter a little bit less, like going from 3 to 2 or 4 to 3 when you have the reroll. Yeah, getting that +1 to hit on an already engaged unit is killer. And then vicious is a nice added bonus. You know, if you're coming in an already injured fight, Vicious can be really great. So I like Mend more. Marin Trant is our first 1-cost attachment for the Kingsguard. He has Intimidation of the Crown. While you control the crown, each time this unit performs an action, one enemy within long range gains 1 condition token of your choice. Point out this is sort of weird text. It says when unit performs an action instead of when a unit activates. Well, I guess it's not weird. Basically, it means that if you moved him with the tactics board, that counts as an action. You could potentially squeeze a couple extra condition tokens out of him with the tactics board. But you know, for 1 point, being able to ping some tokens on some enemies is pretty nifty. Again, we've already covered this multiple times, but you know, he's less good if you don't have Joffrey. This guy works pretty well with a Tywin list. Throw some extra weaken tokens out there. Let Tywin do his thing with the weaken tokens. If you're running some sort of panic list with some Boltons or just Cersei, then you know, throwing out some panic tokens is also pretty useful. This is definitely, if I had a 1 point lying around, I could certainly think about bringing Marin Trant, especially if I was bringing Joffrey. Although, if you're bringing Joffrey, you want to bring a couple Kingsguard to get the benefit for sure. All right, so that takes us to Preston Greensfield, 1 point unit, and while you control the crown, each time this unit performs an action, you may draw 1 tactics card. I think Lannisters have one of the best tactics decks in the game, so you know this is cool. Certainly useful. There's really no such thing as like too many tactics cards. All right, this will work probably quite well with Tyrion. That would certainly annoy the enemy, and that's Preston. And finally, we have Ares Oakhart. He has Protection of the Crown. While you control the crown, enemies suffer -1 to hit when attacking this unit with melee, and also a 1-cost unit. This is actually really similar to Sirio's card, although Sirio's is an order, meaning you can only do it once per turn, whereas Ares can do it as many times as you want as long as he has the crown. It's actually kind of interesting because I was speculated what Sirio would cost, and I still don't know. This attachment costs 1. I was thinking Sirio might cost 2, and Sirio, of course, is both worse and better because, of course, he is an order, so you can only do it once. But Ares needs the crown for it to activate at all. Again, this video is not about Sirio, but it's the mystery of how much Sirio costs deepens. Although at the rate we've been getting spoilers, we might know very soon. So we got these three 1-cost attachments. I like them all. I would even consider probably especially Marin, taking him even without Joffrey, because like, you know, if I'm bringing Cersei, I'm going to grab him the crown anyway. And that takes us to King Joffrey himself. So this is the commander attachment, and it is simply a negative modifier. The king is dead. When this model is always the last model destroyed from this unit. When this model is destroyed, your opponent gains +2 additional victory points, and each of your combat units become panicked. All right, so that's obviously, this commander is not good. You don't want it, generally. And we'll look at his Texas cards in a second, but they're not that great either. So why would you take Joffrey? Well, for the Kingsguard. So we don't know the cost of the Kingsguard yet, but we do know it's a pretty good unit. It's got 8 attack dice, and it keeps 8 attack dice through its whole life. It can't be panicked, can't take negative morale effects. It has 4 flag tokens that can be spent for like special effects. So if you compare it to say like Ned's Honor Guard, which costs 7 points, you know, you'd probably expect it to cost something similar. One negative effect it does have is it only has 8 wounds and it can't be healed. But since it can only be taken with Joffrey, it's probably cheaper than 7. I don't know what that cost is. I feel like it'd probably have to be like 4 for me to want to take it. I could see it being as cheap as free, honestly. I mean, Joffrey is pretty bad, as we're about to see. His actual attachment is horrible. And then looking at his tactics cards, they're not great. They're not useless, and of course, you don't have to play tactics cards. So you could always just discard these at the beginning of your turn. Although if you were to do all that, you are giving up 6 of your 20 tactics cards. So you know that is also quite a penalty. But these are his 3 cards. I am the king. When a friendly combat unit is attacked, after defense dice are rolled, automatically block D3 wounds. So, we've seen that ability before. After this attack has been completed, the defender becomes vulnerable, which is you, and your opponent chooses one of your combat units to become panicked. So you get a block D3 wounds, and then you're going to take 2 condition tokens. Is that a good deal? Probably not. There's maybe some times, where you just need to keep a unit alive for a round, where it might be worth it, but generally, that's pretty bad. Traitors, I will have their heads. Start a friendly turn. One enemy combat unit becomes panicked, and then one enemy combat unit suffers a panic test. After this test has been completed, your opponent may choose one of your combat units to become panicked and one of your combat units to become weakened. They may select the same unit. So again, this is bad. Putting out a panic token and panicking an enemy is cool. Certainly, if you're already building towards a panic list, this is potentially pretty good. It could be pretty useful if you're playing Feast for Crows also. But again, for a panic token and a panic test, you're getting 2 condition tokens on your units. And then finally, you have You Will Obey Me. When a friendly combat unit makes a melee attack before attack dice are rolled, the attack gains +1 to hit and rolls +2 attack dice. Again, pretty powerful card, but after this attack has been completed, the unit becomes weakened, and your opponent may choose one other combat unit to become panicked. These are 3 pretty decent cards, honestly, with then pretty horrible negative effects. Now, the one thing I would say is at a certain point, if you play enough of these, you're not going to worry about getting panicked anymore because all your units are going to be panicked already. But, the Lannister units don't necessarily want to be panicked, unless, of course, you're bringing a bunch of Poor Fellows and Warrior Sons, which is, of course, an option. But when you factor in the penalties on these tactics cards, this is probably the worst commander deck in the game. Really no question. There's certainly be times where it's going to be worth, putting a bunch of tokens out to kill a unit with You Will Obey Me. And there's probably some times where you're trying to get you could probably pop a unit with traitors that will have their heads. But Joffrey, in a vacuum, Joffrey is a pretty lame commander. In fact, he's a bad one, right? And which leads me to believe that you're going to get a fairly cheap Kingsguard unit with him. So what do you guys think? At the rate stuff's been getting spoiled, we'll probably know the cost of the Kingsguard pretty darn soon. Do you think I'm right? It's going to be between 0 and 4, or do you think it's going to be more than that? Let me know in the comment section. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Lots of spoilers have been coming out, and I've been making videos. I'm going to keep on doing that. And thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.